spike in earthquake activity has scientists paying close attention to Mount St. Helens. We want to know if this means we're headed towards another eruption.
Time residents really don't take lightly any kind of activity at Mount St. Helens. Well, there's been a lot more earthquakes lately, but experts tracking the volcano say it really is following a pattern.
For the first time in over 4 decades, Mount St. Helens has begun to stir again. Deep within its vast and gaping caldera, seismic tremors have registered in increasing intensity, prompting immediate attention from volcanologists around the globe. The last major eruption in 1980 devastated the surrounding region and left behind an unmistakable reminder of nature's raw power, a horseshoe-shaped crater that became a symbol of both destruction and geological curiosity. Now that same crater is rumbling once more, not with the distant echo of its past, but with the urgency of new geological unrest. Scientists are not simply intrigued, they are panicking. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. It began subtly. A few minor quakes, hardly perceptible to most instruments, began registering on local seismic arrays. At first, it was easy to dismiss these as background noise, normal crustal adjustments in a region long known for tectonic activity. But then the pattern changed. The frequency of the tremors increased, their epicenters growing shallower, their rhythms more erratic and clustered. Swarms of micro-earthquakes beneath the volcano's summit suggested a pressurized force building below the surface. That force, almost certainly, was magma. Remote sensors perched along the rim and embedded deep within the flanks of the mountain began to pick up subtle bulges in the terrain. Ground deformation, a telltale sign of magmatic intrusion, was no longer a hypothetical concern. Something was pushing from beneath, lifting and shifting the crust of the Earth itself. Thermal imaging from satellites detected increasing heat signatures, radiating in patterns eerily similar to those observed in the months leading up to the 1980 eruption. But this time, the activity was centering deeper within the caldera, the very heart of Mount St. Helens. The scientific community, particularly those who specialize in volcanology, has been thrown into a state of high alert. This isn't just another restless mountain exhibiting minor grumbles. The caldera's activity implies a reactivation of the central magma chamber, something that had lain mostly dormant since the explosive lateral blast that changed the face of the volcano 45 years ago. This is not merely another volcanic event, it could be the prelude to something immense, something potentially catastrophic. The implications stretch far beyond the physical geography of the Pacific Northwest. Mount St. Helens is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, a chain of volcanoes intimately linked through deep subterranean fault lines and magma channels. When one member of this geological family awakens, others often follow. The timing and nature of St. Helens' reactivation could signal broader tectonic movements, indicating that the entire arc is entering a more active phase. If that is the case, cities like Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver might need to prepare for not just one eruption, but a chain reaction of seismic and volcanic events. Mount St. Helens has always been a closely monitored site, with one of the most advanced arrays of geological instruments on the continent. But even with decades of accumulated data, the signs emerging now are pushing the boundaries of what scientists understand about caldera behavior. The 1980 eruption was a lateral blast, but caldera-based eruptions tend to behave very differently. They are often more centralized, sometimes more explosive, and significantly harder to predict. The reactivation of the central caldera opens up a whole new playbook of potential outcomes, most of them deeply concerning. One of the more troubling signs comes from gas emissions. Sensors have begun detecting increased levels of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide being released from vents and fissures within the caldera. These gases are released when magma ascends toward the surface, depressurizing as it rises. While some gas emissions can occur without eruptive consequences, the particular chemical signatures being observed here are consistent with freshly rising magma. This new intrusion is likely not just leftover residue from previous activity, it's probably a fresh influx from deeper within the Earth's mantle. The landscape around Mount St. Helens is also changing in response. Meltwater from glaciers atop the peak is seeping into newly formed cracks, hissing and boiling away into clouds of steam. Vegetation in some areas has begun to wilt under the heat. Animal life is displaying unusual behavior, with local wildlife abandoning traditional migration routes and nesting zones. Even birds, sensitive to changes in barometric pressure and seismic activity, have shifted their flight paths away from the mountain's vicinity. Seismographs have captured harmonic tremor, a type of continuous rhythmic ground shaking often associated with magma movement. Unlike typical earthquake patterns, which feature sudden jolts and aftershocks, harmonic tremor is like the constant hum of a vast underground machine powering up. This unmistakable sound, captured deep below the surface, is considered one of the most reliable precursors to an eruption. Its presence within the caldera adds a deeply ominous note to the growing symphony of geological warning signs. The shape of the caldera itself is undergoing subtle but measurable change. LiDAR scans taken daily by drone and satellite are revealing a gradual uplift of the caldera floor. This bulging suggests the accumulation of magma in a chamber directly beneath the surface, perhaps no more than a few kilometers deep. Should this chamber reach a critical pressure point, it could fracture the rock above and unleash a vertical eruption, the kind capable of blasting ash miles into the sky and raining debris across entire states. Emergency response agencies are not waiting for confirmation. Evacuation plans for surrounding communities are being reviewed and revised. Helicopters are pre-positioned, shelters resupplied, and communication lines tested. For all the preparation, however, there remains a troubling uncertainty. Unlike hurricanes or floods, volcanic eruptions are notoriously difficult to predict with precision. The margin for error is razor thin, and the consequences of being wrong are devastating. There is also the concern of lahar formation. Lahars, volcanic mudflows, can be just as deadly as an eruption, if not more so. Triggered by the sudden melting of snow and ice on the mountain slopes, these slurries of rock, mud, and water can thunder down river valleys at incredible speeds, wiping out everything in their path. Given the extensive snowpack still present in high elevations, and the reactivation occurring within the caldera, the chances of a lahar event are climbing by the day. Geologists are particularly unnerved by the parallels to past caldera-driven eruptions around the world. From the catastrophic eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991 to the infamous collapse of Mount Tambora in 1815, history has shown that caldera activity can reshape entire regions. Pinatubo's eruption, for instance, injected vast quantities of sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere, cooling global temperatures for years. If Mount St. Helens were to erupt in similar fashion, the consequences could reverberate far beyond North America. The resurgence of Mount St. Helens has also rekindled debates within the scientific community about long-term volcanic forecasting. Despite decades of research, the process of magma movement, chamber pressurization, and eruption timing is still only partially understood. This new activity within the caldera provides both an extraordinary opportunity and an immense challenge. Scientists are racing to develop real-time models that can simulate potential eruption scenarios based on the rapidly changing data. Supercomputers churn through petabytes of geophysical input, but the answers they produce remain filled with uncertainty. In the public sphere, anxiety is growing. The imagery of a smoking crater, the media coverage of volcanic sirens and emergency drills, the interviews with tense scientists, all of it is feeding a growing sense of dread. The memory of the 1980 eruption remains vivid for many residents of the Pacific Northwest. Thousands were displaced, dozens lost their lives, and landscapes were permanently transformed. That event was explosive and unexpected. What's unfolding now is more deliberate, more foreboding. It feels less like a surprise and more like an inevitability. At research institutions, the mood is a complex mix of excitement and fear. Mount St. Helens has always been a crown jewel of American volcanology. Its accessibility and historical importance have made it one of the most studied volcanoes in the world. Yet for all the instruments and eyes focused on it, there remains the undeniable truth that the Earth holds its secrets close. The mounting evidence is clear. Magma is rising, the caldera is responding, and a threshold may soon be crossed. One particularly distressing scenario involves a collapse within the caldera itself. If the crust above the magma chamber thins to the point of instability, it could cause a sudden catastrophic implosion, triggering a full-scale caldera-forming eruption. These events are rare but have occurred in geological history with global consequences. The scale of destruction would dwarf the 1980 eruption and bring with it unimaginable consequences for the region and potentially the planet. Scientists are coordinating with international counterparts to compare Mount St. Helens' behavior with other volatile systems worldwide. Observatories in Iceland, Japan, and Indonesia, countries well acquainted with volcanic risk, are offering data, modeling techniques, and historical parallels. The hope is that collective global expertise can shed light on what may be unfolding beneath the surface. There is no competition now, only cooperation driven by urgency. The cascading effects of a major eruption at Mount St. Helens would extend into economic, social, and environmental spheres. Ashfall alone could shut down air traffic across the continent, as it did during Iceland's Geological eruption in 2010. Water supplies could be tainted, transportation corridors severed, agriculture disrupted. The Columbia River, a vital artery for commerce, lies in the volcano's shadow and is highly susceptible to blockage or contamination from ash and debris. Power grids, dependent on clean air for cooling systems and turbine operation, could be jeopardized if ash clogs filters and ventilation systems. And then there's the human cost, the psychological toll of living under a looming threat. Parents watching the news and wondering whether to send their children to school, families packing go bags, elders remembering the darkened skies of May 1980. Life in the shadow of an active volcano becomes an exercise in preparedness and patience, with tension etched into every day. At the heart of it all is the mountain itself. Mount St. Helens is not merely a volcano, it is a symbol of resilience and warning, a monument to Earth's power and unpredictability. The reawakening of its caldera after 45 years is a clarion call not just to scientists, but to all who live within reach of its potential fury. The signs are no longer ambiguous. The Earth is moving, breathing, pressing upward. What happens next remains uncertain, but one truth is undeniable. The caldera has stirred, and when a sleeping giant stirs, the world must listen. While the initial stages of Mount St. Helens' awakening have shocked scientists and drawn the world's attention, the situation has continued to evolve at an alarming pace. Over the last several days, geophysical readings have crossed thresholds never recorded at this site before. What had been a slow crescendo of seismic and thermal activity is now transforming into a rapidly accelerating sequence of geologic processes, each one compounding the next. The mountain is not merely active, it is volatile, and its behavior is pushing experts to reconsider long-standing assumptions about how, and how quickly, volcanic systems can evolve. One of the most unexpected developments has been the emergence of new fumaroles, vents spewing hot gases, at higher elevations on the interior walls of the caldera. These vents, previously dormant, have begun to release superheated steam and volcanic gases in thick white plumes that rise high into the air and linger across the summit like a veil. The precise locations of these vents suggest that the magma body beneath the caldera is expanding horizontally, not just vertically. This lateral spread could mean that the magma is searching for multiple paths of escape, paths that, if connected, might lead to a multi-vent eruption or even a full-ring fracture event, a scenario associated with extremely violent caldera collapses. Adding to the growing list of concerns is the phenomenon of acoustic tremor, a low-frequency rumbling sound produced by subsurface magma movement, now being picked up not just by underground instruments, but by sensitive microphones and even wildlife monitoring equipment. The sound, inaudible to the human ear, is considered a strong marker of imminent magmatic ascent. That it is being recorded on such a wide scale, and in patterns that match those seen prior to large eruptions in other volcanic systems, is deeply troubling to geologists tracking the mountain's pulse. Meanwhile, gravity measurements taken by drones and aircraft have revealed minute changes in the density of the crust beneath the summit. Gravity anomalies are an advanced method for identifying the movement of molten rock and have confirmed what seismology and gas emissions were already suggesting. The magma is not only present, but in motion. These measurements indicate significant mass displacement, an invisible but potent force disfiguring the mountain from within. The surface of the volcano is starting to show visual cracks and fissures, not just within the crater, but extending outward along the mountain's flanks. These are not random. Their orientation suggests that the structural integrity of the volcano is becoming compromised under internal pressure. Some of these cracks are widening at a measurable rate each day, indicating intense subsurface stress. A few have begun emitting faint pulses of gas, and their alignment with deeper fault lines points to the possibility that the mountain could rupture along an entirely new vector. Not a lateral blast like 1980, nor a vertical ejection, but a hybridized eruption that could open multiple fronts of destruction simultaneously. Adding to the complexity is the role of hydrothermal systems. Beneath Mount St. Helens lies a network of underground water reservoirs heated by geothermal energy. As magma rises and compresses the rock around it, these water systems can become superheated and flash to steam in an instant, producing phreatic explosions. Violent blasts of steam, ash, and rock that can occur with little to no warning. Already, small phreatic bursts have been detected at the summit, each one scattering fragments and coating the surrounding snow in fine ash. These mini eruptions are often precursors to more serious explosive phases, and their growing frequency is pushing emergency protocols into overdrive. What makes the current situation particularly unnerving is the unpredictability that comes with reactivation after such a long dormancy. A volcano that has lain quiet for decades often accumulates internal pressure far beyond what might be expected in more frequently erupting systems. The crust above can become brittle, the vents clogged, the gas trapped. When the system finally breaches, it can do so catastrophically, with a violence that belies the mountain's relatively modest size. The 1980 event was a potent reminder of this dynamic, and the current indicators suggest that this time the energy release could be even greater. Glaciologists have begun raising their own red flags, as rising subsurface heat has begun melting ice at an accelerated pace. Crevasses are forming in glacier beds, and meltwater is beginning to pool in unstable locations along the slopes. If even a small section of a glacier breaks loose due to underlying instability or explosive force, it could cascade into the valleys below as a deadly lahar, or even an avalanche. These scenarios would threaten downstream communities long before any lava or ash reached them. Further complicating the picture is the behavior of the surrounding ecosystem. Certain species of burrowing mammals, known for their sensitivity to ground vibrations and gas emissions, have disappeared from their usual locations, retreating en masse from the mountain's base. Herd animals have shifted their grazing routes. Even plant life, particularly sensitive alpine species that rely on stable ground temperature and air chemistry, are showing signs of stress and die-off. These ecological changes, while anecdotal, align strongly with measurable geophysical phenomena and serve as additional, albeit non-instrumental, markers of impending change. Scientists are also keeping a wary eye on another unusual development: magnetic field disturbances. Magnetometers placed around the mountain have recorded localized fluctuations that cannot be accounted for by solar activity or human interference. These disturbances, though subtle, correlate with magma intrusion events, and may indicate that new types of igneous material, perhaps more silica-rich and volatile, are entering the system. If the rising magma is of a more explosive composition than previously encountered, the potential destructiveness of the eruption would increase dramatically. Amid all this, global climate scientists have started to model the possible atmospheric effects of a major Mount St. Helens eruption. Should the volcano eject enough ash and sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere, it could create a short-term cooling effect across the northern hemisphere. This phenomenon, known as volcanic winter, has occurred in the past with eruptions like Tambora and Krakatoa. Although Mount St. Helens is not yet at that scale, a caldera eruption would release vast quantities of fine particulate matter capable of altering weather patterns for months or even years. Crops, rainfall cycles, and temperature norms could be affected not just regionally, but globally. The economic consequences of such an eruption are almost too vast to quantify. Beyond the immediate damage to infrastructure, homes, and natural resources, the broader economic impact would ripple outward. Insurance claims would skyrocket. Industries dependent on transportation, trucking, shipping, aviation would face paralyzing delays. Energy providers reliant on hydroelectric systems could see dams threatened by debris or overwhelmed by sudden floodwaters. Tourism to the Pacific Northwest, already a multi-billion-dollar sector, would likely collapse overnight. And then there's the psychological toll of uncertainty, which is rising hand in hand with the geological threat. Residents near the volcano live in a tense state of watchfulness, Many of them have lived in its shadow their whole lives, trusting that the worst had passed. Now they are glued to alerts, attending community meetings, studying evacuation maps, the sound of helicopters, the rumble of distant tremors, the scent of sulfur on the wind. These have become part of daily life. Children are asking questions their parents can't answer. Businesses are making contingency plans. Schools are running evacuation drills under skies streaked with smoke and ash. At national and international levels, the reawakening of Mount St. Helens is reshaping how volcanic risk is perceived. It has become clear that even extensively studied volcanoes can surprise experts with the suddenness and scale of their behavior. Funding has surged into volcanology departments and hazard preparedness agencies, not out of curiosity, but necessity. The lessons drawn from this event may one day shape global policy on early warning systems, emergency readiness, and environmental resilience. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Mount St. Helens showing activity after 45 years? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.